There is a plant growing in your garden right now that contains more calcium per 100 grams than whole milk, more iron by weight than a beef sirloin, more vitamin A than a carrot, more protein per calorie than spinach. It requires 0 water, 0 fertilizer, 0 maintenance, and $0. It simply appears every spring in the disturbed soil of every garden bed, every sidewalk crack, every vacant lot in North America. You have been pulling it out by the roots and throwing it in the trash your entire life. Meanwhile, you are driving to a grocery store to pay $4 for a plastic clamshell of spinach that was grown in California, sprayed with pesticides, packed in plastic, loaded onto a refrigerated truck, driven 1,500 miles, and placed under fluorescent lights for a week before you bought it. Spinach that contains a fraction of the nutrition of the plant you just composted. This is lamb's quarters, Chenopodium album, and the story of how one of the most nutritionally complete plants in the world became classified as a weed is a story about who profits when you do not know what is growing in your own soil. The knowledge is ancient, and it refused to disappear entirely. Excavations at Neolithic settlement sites across Europe, dating back 6,000 years, have consistently found lamb's quarters seeds in cooking vessels and storage pits, not as contamination, as intentional accumulation. These were not people accidentally eating a weed. They were harvesting and storing a food source. At the Neolithic site of Haraldskær in Denmark, researchers found the preserved stomach contents of a woman who died approximately 2,500 years ago. Among the identifiable contents were lamb's quarters seeds, consumed in quantity. She was not starving. She was eating what her community considered food. In North America before European contact, the Zuni cultivated lamb's quarters deliberately alongside corn, squash, and beans, not as a weed tolerated among crops, as a crop itself. The Navajo used it as a primary green vegetable and dried the seeds for winter flour. The Cherokee boiled the young leaves as a pot herb in early spring before other crops were ready. The Iroquois ground the seeds into a flour that could be stored through winter, an insurance crop, something that would still be there when the corn failed. The Lewis and Clark expedition journals document members eating lamb's quarters during stretches when game was scarce. Meriwether Lewis noted it as a nutritious green without ceremony. He was not describing something exotic. He was describing the plant that appeared wherever their camp disturbed the soil. This was a food that followed humans. Wherever people broke ground, lamb's quarters appeared. It evolved alongside human agriculture because disturbed soil is exactly where it thrives. It went where we went. It fed us where we settled. Then we decided to call it a weed. The reclassification happened as industrial agriculture consolidated, and the word weed was redefined, no longer meaning a plant with no value, now meaning a plant that interferes with monoculture production. Here is the problem lamb's quarters poses to industrial agriculture. It germinates before almost any cultivated crop. It grows faster than corn seedlings. It competes aggressively for nitrogen in the first weeks after planting, so the companies selling herbicides needed it dead, and the regulatory infrastructure needed language to justify killing it. 33 states currently list lamb's quarters as a noxious weed or agricultural pest. Federal publications describe it almost entirely in terms of control and eradication. Extension Service bulletins discuss it exclusively in the context of yield loss and herbicide application. Not one official United States agricultural document written after 1960 discusses how to eat it. That is not an accident of omission. That is a policy position, because here is what the herbicide literature leaves out. Per 100 grams of fresh leaf, lamb's quarters contains 309 milligrams of calcium. Whole milk contains approximately 113 milligrams per 100 grams. The weed in your garden contains nearly 3 times as much calcium as the food that an entire federal nutrition program is built around promoting. It contains 6.2 milligrams of iron per 100 grams. Beef sirloin contains approximately 2.6. The weed contains more than twice the iron of a steak. Vitamin A content runs to approximately 2,640 international units per 100 grams. A raw carrot delivers approximately 835. And unlike spinach, which binds calcium with oxalic acid and reduces its bioavailability significantly, lamb's quarters delivers its minerals in a form your body can actually absorb. The $4 clamshell of spinach is, by nearly every nutritional metric that matters, an inferior product to the one you are pulling out of your raised beds and dropping in the yard waste bin. Now understand the commercial architecture that benefits from you not knowing this. The American spinach industry generates approximately $330 million annually. It depends on consumers believing that spinach is the definitive leafy green. That belief was not organic. It was constructed. The Popeye campaign, launched in 1929, was one of the most successful vegetable marketing initiatives in American history. Spinach consumption among American children increased by 33% in the years following the cartoon's introduction. The canned spinach industry funded and promoted the character directly. This is documented advertising history, not theory. What the campaign never mentioned is that the nutritional data used to justify Popeye's spinach-derived strength was based on a decimal point error. A German chemist in 1870 had accidentally misplaced a decimal when recording spinach's iron content, overstating it by a factor of 10. The error was identified and corrected in the 1930s. The correction was quietly noted in scientific literature. The marketing kept running for decades without adjustment because the correction was inconvenient. By the time the error was widely acknowledged, spinach had achieved cultural dominance. Grocery infrastructure was built around it. Cold chains were optimized for it. Brands were established on it. A correction to a 150-year-old decimal point error was not going to dismantle all of that. So the marketing continued, and lamb's quarters kept getting added to noxious weed lists. The herbicide connection is where the money becomes undeniable. Glyphosate, sold commercially as Roundup, generates approximately $5 billion in annual global sales. Atrazine, the herbicide most commonly applied in corn production, generates an additional $2 billion annually in the United States alone. Both are applied extensively to control, among other targets, lamb's quarters populations in monoculture fields. Lamb's quarters is listed as a primary target weed in efficacy studies for virtually every major broadleaf herbicide on the American market. The companies that sell those herbicides fund the university extension programs that train farmers. They fund the agricultural publications that define what a weed is. They contribute to the campaigns of legislators who write the noxious weed classifications. None of this is hidden. It is documented in lobbying disclosures and institutional funding records. They are not paying to suppress a food source. They are paying to protect a market. The outcome is the same. What survived is what always survives. Community knowledge in the margins of the official story. Greek and Turkish immigrant communities in the United States never stopped eating it. They call it horta, wild greens. And in Greek-American households from Chicago to Astoria, the arrival of lamb's quarters in April is treated as a seasonal event worth anticipating. Grandmothers know which plants to pick at which stage, to harvest young growth before the plant bolts, to blanch it briefly and dress it with olive oil and lemon. They never needed an extension service bulletin because their families had been eating it continuously for generations on 2 continents. Mexican-American communities in the Southwest know it as quilites, wild greens central to rural Mexican cooking for centuries. Quilites-based dishes appear in pre-Columbian culinary records. The tradition survived colonization, industrialization, and immigration intact because it lived in kitchens, not in agricultural policy documents that could be rewritten. In rural Appalachia, older generations still call it fat hen and gather it in spring alongside ramps, maintaining a foraging calendar that maps nutritional abundance onto seasonal availability in ways that industrial agriculture has spent 70 years trying to make people forget. These communities are eating better, at lower cost, with lower environmental impact than any industrial salad green can offer, with a plant that grows without anyone's help, cannot be patented, cannot be owned, and will not stop appearing every spring, no matter how many classification lists it gets added to. Here is what you need to know to start using what is already growing in your soil. Lamb's quarters is easy to identify. Look for diamond or goosefoot-shaped leaves, slightly serrated at the edges. covered with a fine white powdery coating that gives the leaf a frosted appearance. Young leaves look as though they have been dusted with flour. The coating is natural wax, not disease. Stems are often streaked with red or purple at the nodes. The plant appears in early spring and grows quickly to 3 or 6 feet if left to mature. You want it young, before it flowers, when the leaves are tender and the flavor is mild and clean. Somewhere between spinach and Swiss chard, with none of the metallic edge that spinach sometimes carries. Young leaves can be eaten raw in salads. Slightly older growth is excellent briefly sautéed in olive oil with garlic, wilted exactly as you would wilt spinach, but yielding better texture and more complex flavor. It works anywhere you would use cooked spinach. In pasta, in eggs, in soup, in grain bowls. The seeds, produced in late summer, are edible and high in protein and fat. Historically, they were ground into flour. You can dry them and add them to baked goods or use them as a grain substitute. One note, like spinach and chard, lamb's quarters contains oxalic acid. People with kidney stones or gout should moderate consumption. For everyone else, the oxalic acid content at normal dietary quantities is not a meaningful concern, and blanching reduces it further. Every spring, the plant comes back. It does not ask for anything. It simply grows in the soil you're digging disturbed, pulls minerals from deep in the earth, and offers you leaves more nutritious than anything in the produce aisle. 309 milligrams of calcium, 6.2 milligrams of iron, 2,640 international units of vitamin A, complete protein, $0. And every spring, 33 states and $5 billion in herbicide sales tell you to kill it. The weed does not know about any of that. It just keeps coming back. They cannot stop it. They can only stop you from knowing what it is. Now, you know.